What's happening, everybody, on this Thursday, August 28th, 2025. My name is Kevin Smith. Thank you all so much for tuning into Loud Majority Live. We got a jam-packed show for you guys today. We're going to be talking about more of the fallout from the horrific shooting in Minneapolis yesterday. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more fallout on this. There's press conferences happening pretty much all over the country, all over Minneapolis. We are awaiting a press conference from Minneapolis police at the moment. Also, we are awaiting, what do we got here? J.D. Vance speaking in Wisconsin. Yeah, we got J.D. Vance speaking in Wisconsin right now. There's a lot going on at the moment. Of course, Democrats completely go out of their way to take the wrong possible approach on every single issue, particularly when it comes to this mass shooting, but really just crime in general. So we're going to break all of that down. Governor Kathy Hochul thanks President Trump. Thanks, President Trump, which must have been kind of weird, as she calls for the ending of cash bail in New York City. But let's dive right on in. We are going to throw it over to J.D. Vance right now. Let's see what he has to say.
Has been his consistent line from the very beginning that we have an incredible law enforcement capability in the United States. You know what's crazy about crime is most of the violent crime is committed by a very small number of people. When we talk about a violent crime problem, we're not talking about thousands upon thousands of people in Milwaukee. We're talking about a few hundred people who probably commit 90% of the violent crime. We would love to come in and help lock up those violent criminals. I hope the mayor of Milwaukee gets some common sense and actually fights for her residents for a change, or his residents for a change, because we would love to actually help cut down on the crime in this community. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Anthony DeBruzzi, Spectrum News, Wisconsin. Sticking with Milwaukee, but a little different. Yesterday, Governor Tony Evers requested a disaster declaration from President Trump after the historic flooding that we've seen in the Milwaukee area. So can Wisconsinites count on the administration for financial help through this?
Yeah, so obviously, look, we want to help people. We want to help our fellow citizens, and I know that Wisconsin has suffered some serious problems. I have not talked to the President of the United States. I'm not even sure that he's aware yet that the governor has issued that disaster declaration, but I will take that back to Washington, D.C. and make sure we respond to it promptly. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Mr. Vice President. Daniel Gomez, WEAU in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So I see that you've been touring around the country, visiting congressional battleground districts. No different here. Wisconsin's third. You're here also garnering up some support for Derek Van Orden. So my question here is, can we expect you again next year when we actually get to the midterm elections? And will you also address other issues in Wisconsin's third district, which include agriculture, childcare, healthcare, and all these other things that impact rural, hardworking, working class Wisconsinites here?
Of course. Well, do you all want to have me back next year? Is that okay? All right. Look, so long as the people of the 3rd District will have me, yes, I will keep on coming back and keep on talking about the issues that matter. You asked about agriculture, I think rural health care, and also child care. Look, if you look at the working families tax cut, there's a lot there for agriculture. There's a lot. For example, if you buy a new tractor, you buy a new piece of farm equipment, wouldn't it be nice if you were rewarded in the tax code instead of penalized in the tax code? Well, now, thanks to the working families tax cut, you are going to be rewarded, which is why the farmers were really big and supportive and behind the legislation. We had such great support from our farming community in Wisconsin and all over the country for this legislation, I think in part because it does a lot for our farmers. You asked about health care. Look, rural health care in this country is in bad shape. It was left in bad shape by the previous administration, and this legislation, the Working Families Tax Cut, has got tens of billions of dollars to shore up our rural health care system. It is so unusual to hear Democrats say this is going to be bad for health care when we're spending billions of dollars to try to fix some of the rural health care problems in our country. And by the way, has anybody been awake for the last 4 years? Any of these national Democrats? How was the rural health care system doing under Joe Biden when you had hospitals and clinics closing at a record and alarming rate? We're trying to fix that. We want people to be able to access to health care, but we want American citizens to be able to access health care, and that's what makes us different from the National Democrat Party. And I'll take maybe a couple more questions, then we're going to hit the road.
Hi, thank you so much for taking questions from us. My name is Laura Schulte. I'm a reporter with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. You've talked a little bit, about the disaster declaration, but I'm wondering, how long will Milwaukee have to wait for a disaster declaration from President Trump?
Well, if I understood the question correctly, and this is the first time that I'm hearing about it, we got the request from the governor yesterday. Is that right? Okay, so I mean, it's very possible that request has not even made it to the president's desk. I mean, these things sometimes take more than 12 hours before they get to the president's desk. So what I can promise you is now that I'm aware of it, we're going to take a look at it. We're going to make sure that it gets the review that it requires. And look, we love Wisconsin. We love all of our American citizens. People are struggling. We recognize that, and we want to figure out ways to help them. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, Adam Roberts, News Radio WTMJ, also out of Milwaukee. A follow-up to that question as well. I know that you still have time to make this decision, but can you explain why President Trump or yourself did not tour the southeast Wisconsin area like was done in Texas after their historic flooding?
Yeah, I can give you a very simple answer to that question is, if you remember the Texas flooding, the president did not show up until he felt like he could provide comfort and aid to some of the grieving families, but not actually be a huge distraction for law enforcement. I mean, look, it is a reality of the world that when the president or the vice president of the United States show up, there are a lot of Secret Service, there's a lot of local law enforcement. And I remember explicitly being in the Oval Office talking with the president about this. He said, I really want to go to Texas, and I really want to visit with these grieving families, but we can't do it until the local law enforcement says we can support this without affecting the recovery and other efforts. So we would love to visit, we would love to talk to people, but some of this depends on we talk with local law enforcement, and we don't just want to show up for a photo op. We want to show up and actually help, and that's what the President of the United States is focused on. Thank you, sir. And I'll do one more question before we hit the road.
Jeff Murdoch, The Washington Times. So there are plenty of people, there are scores of people still in jail that have been pardoned under President Biden's auto pens. Do you think they should be released from prison?
Well, I think that there's something weird about this auto pen, which is that you have a guy who even some of his own staff members said did not have the mental faculty to be president of the United States, okay? While at the same time, he allegedly signed a bunch of pardons, which we now know were signed by the auto pen. I think it raises a very difficult question about whether those pardons were actually legitimate in the first place. I mean, think about this. How can you sign a pardon? How can you engage in presidential conduct that's binding if your own staff members are saying, well, this guy wasn't exactly fit to be the president of the United States? So look, I'll let the courts figure this out. As the president of the United States has said, President Trump, we always follow the court orders and we always try to work with the courts. But I think the American people, far more than, whether this pardon is thrown out or that pardon is thrown out by the court, let's step back and ask ourselves, how is it that the American media and senior members of the Democratic Party conspired to hide us from the fact that the President of the United States wasn't fit to do the job? This is about more than politics. This is about more than policy disagreements. This is about if you get a phone call at 3 a.m. and there's a national security emergency, does the person who's answering the phone have the mental ability to do the job? And if the answer is no, then all of us, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, have been defrauded. And I think the Biden presidency is a big, fat example of the American media defrauding the American people. So on that note, I just want to thank you all again for having us. And just remember, we are every single day in Washington, D.C., we are fighting for you. We're fighting for your jobs. We're fighting for your wages. We're fighting for low taxes for you and your families. We're fighting for rural health care. We believe that the most important thing the President of the United States can do is put the interests of Americans first. That is what we have done for 7 months, and we'll keep on doing it for the next 3.5 years. God bless you all. Thank you for having me.
That was J.D. Vance live in Wisconsin. I want to make sure we bring you guys that. Most of the networks probably aren't covering the vice president at what looked like some kind of an auto plant or some venture such as that. So we want to make sure we bring you guys all of the news as it breaks. Guys, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. Share the video out all over the place. We're going to dive back into the topics of the show today as we get rocking, as we get rolling. Before we get to that, do me a favor. Head on over to loudmajorityusa.com. That's loudmajorityusa.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Check out our shop. That is the best way to support this program and everything we've got going on over here. You guys can also use promo code RUMBLE to get 20% off everything on the website. There you go. Boom. There you go. You see that little code right there at the top. Look at this. All the new stuff. Actually, look at this one. I happen to really like this one because I love Dunkin' Donuts. Donald Trump, America runs on Trump. So if you are a Dunkin' Donuts fan, you guys can pick this up today. Head on over to loudmajorityusa.com. That's loudmajorityusa.com and use promo code RUMBLE to get 20% off everything on the website. That's promo code RUMBLE to get 20% off everything on the website. So we are obviously coming off an absolutely horrific tragedy in Minneapolis yesterday, and Democrats have done absolutely everything imaginable to make this about everything except what it's actually about. We went over it yesterday. If this person had been accurately diagnosed as mentally ill, which they were, because transgenderism is a mental illness, or at least it was up until about 2 minutes ago when Democrats decided that it was that they were going to play politics with almost everything. Jacob Frey, who, look, he's the mayor of a city that's going through tragedy right now, and he's upset. And I don't blame him for being upset. I don't blame him for being distraught. But then what he does is he goes on TV and contradicts his own statements. What do I mean by that? Well, he goes on TV and says we shouldn't villainize any particular community. Of course, in this case, he's talking about the trans community. The only problem with that is, in his doing so, he villainizes, 220 million gun owners all over the country.
When you talk about compassion, I don't want to tiptoe around the edge of this, but, the shooter's name was in question, the gender of the shooter. No one's really sure what's going on there. 5 years ago it was Robert, then a name changed to Robin. Okay. This is being seized in all corners, as you can imagine, in all sorts of ways. And you know that, Mayor. And perhaps that's why when you spoke about this so profoundly and powerfully as you are even here now, but when you spoke about this today publicly, you voiced concern for the transgender community, for the community overall. And obviously, you chose to do that in that moment because you thought it was important. And I wanted to give you a chance to say why you felt it was important to do that in that moment.
Obviously, I've heard about the rhetoric and the narrative that is being pushed out, but here's the thing. Anybody that is going to use this as an opportunity to villainize our trans community or any community has lost touch with a common humanity. We got to be operating not out of hate for any group, but out of a love for our children. That's where the focus needs to be right now. A love for our kids. Seeing these kids, not just as somebody else's kids, this horrific thing happened, but what if it was our own? How would we feel then? So, look, we need to be standing up for every community out there. A Catholic community, too, by the way. I mean, any community that suffers this kind of blow, our Minneapolis community, you got to stand up for them. But, I feel oftentimes in these instances there's this desire to villainize a group. You want to call this an act of cowardice? Do it, because it is. But regardless of what group or background, gender, the bottom line is that kids got killed. let's love each other more. Let's love each other more, because the antidote to hate is not more hate. Hurt people, and the antidote to hate is a whole lot more love. That's where we all need to be going right now.
Well, Mayor Frey, I'm grateful to you for taking the time and sharing that. And thank you. Thank you for being with me.
So it turns out we can villainize any community, which I would agree with, but we can villainize the 220 million gun owners in America because, of course, people like you, people like I, we are completely expendable when it comes to the Democratic Party. But, of course, he was not the only one who decided to make this about everything other than what it actually is. Jen Psaki, who, obviously, a left-wing operative working in the news media, she decided to take it even a step further. And look, Jen Psaki starts out this clip crying. I don't think this is fake. I think she's genuinely upset. These are dead kids. It is upsetting to everybody. I don't think these are like crocodile tears. I think when she found out that a bunch of kids died, it made her very upset. Of course, the problem with it is, and it's what Democrats seem to do in every possible instance, no matter what, is what they will say is, unless you do what I say, then you're not taking the situation seriously enough. Unless you follow my exact prescription for curing problem X, that you actually don't care about the outcome. Here with Jen Psaki.
And all they should be hoping to do is have someone to sit with at lunch or someone to play with on the playground. And they should be waiting to hear an update when they get home. And that is not what these parents at the school experienced today. Sorry, this is a tough one. Having your child killed while they are sitting in a pew for a morning prayer service is not what any parent should have to worry about. And I have felt a mixture of anger and a lot of anger and emotional exhaustion about this today, as I'm sure many of you have, because we have been here so many times. And yet again, like clockwork, half the politicians in our country have little more to offer than thoughts and prayers. That is all they are offering. Join all of us in praying for the victims, was Vice President J.D. Vance's response today. That's what he said. That's it. Please join me in praying for everyone involved, Trump wrote. We have seen this play out over and over again. There is a shooting, then come the thoughts and prayers, and then comes the attempt to shift the focus. This is what always happens. You're going to start seeing narratives. You're already seeing them. They're already out there about how the shooter was trans. You're going to see narratives about how the shooter appeared to be anti-Trump and anti-Semitic and clearly was in the midst of a mental health crisis. There's no question about that. But here's the thing. There are trans people all over the world. There are anti-Semitic people, unfortunately, all over the world. And people filled with plenty of political hate all over the world. And mental health issues are not unique to the United States. And yes, we should do more to address them. But it's also an issue all over the world. But this is the only country where shootings like this one happen this often. The United States not only has the highest rate of gun violence of any country in the world, it's become a leading cause of death for young people and teenagers.
Of course, Jen Psaki ignores the fact that, in her myopic little world, no, it turns out gun violence is a massive problem in a lot of other places, too. She's talking about places where white people live, which is pretty ironic considering she's supposed to be the party of equality and the party of racism. Ilhan Omar did the exact same thing, where she said that gun violence is a direct cause of white supremacy, which I think is a little strange, considering she's from Somalia, and I've seen Black Hawk Down, and turns out gun violence there is a serious problem as well. No doubt, gun violence is a problem in this country, but it's always conveniently left out. It's always conveniently left out of the equation where the majority of gun violence comes from. And, of course, that would be inner city gangs. But left-wingers can't say things like that because that would give the game away. Carolyn Levitt responded to Jen Psaki at the press briefing a little while ago.
Reagan. Thanks, Carolyn. I have two questions for you. Sure. Democrats, including former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, attacked prayer and pushed gun control in the aftermath of yesterday's shooting. What's the White House's response to their comments?
Yes, I saw the comments of my predecessor, Ms. Psaki, and frankly, I think they're incredibly insensitive and disrespectful to the tens of millions of Americans of faith across this country who believe in the power of prayer, who believe that prayer works, and who believe that in a time of mourning like this, when beautiful young children were killed while praying in a church, it's utterly disrespectful to deride the power of prayer in this country, and it's disrespectful to the millions of Americans of faith. And I would encourage Ms. Psaki to pray for these families themselves who need it right now more than ever.
My second question for you is that there have been media outlets who have glazed over the fact that the shooter was confused in their gender identity. Does the administration believe that this element needs to be investigated in the shooting?
All of the elements are being investigated in the shooting, absolutely. Which is why part of the reason the FBI director came out and immediately confirmed that facet of the investigation. John.
Thanks a lot, Carolyn. Two questions on two separate
issues. And she's absolutely right. Look, the firearms that are in this house are never going to commit a mass shooting. They're just not. You know why? Because I'm not mentally ill. Moreover, and I think a lot of people feel this way, is that if they were to outlaw things like assault weapons, whatever the hell that even means, all that really means is just scary guns that look scary. If they were to outlaw these things, all you would do is artificially make felons out of about 150 million Americans. Moreover, in blue states like New York, I don't have the option to get a handgun, or I'd have one, because I have to purchase long guns, because getting a pistol permit in the state of New York is damn near impossible unless you're former law enforcement. I am left with no other options but to get that. But not everybody in the media focused on even that aspect of it. Some people focused on the stuff that actually matters in this case. The stuff that actually matters. And you know what actually matters? Whether or not we get the pronouns right of the person who committed the mass shooting.
Another piece of the puzzle as to who the shooter was. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune says, according to court records, because there's been some confusion about what the shooter's name was.
Yes.
Robin Westman's mother applied to change her child's name in 2019. It was, at one point, Robert Paul Westman.
Correct.
But since she identifies as a female and wants her name to reflect that identification, was underage, it's now Robin Westman.
Ah, yes. Moreover, all over the internet yesterday, all I had to hear about were all the straight white men who have committed mass shootings all over the country. And yeah, look, school shootings are a white guy's game. It's just what the numbers bear out. But I don't know, Democrats. I thought this person was a she. And according to Jake Tapper, he is a she. So if he is a she, then this wouldn't fall under the straight white male category going on in the mass shooting game. You guys got to figure out which way is up. But Democrats can't ever do that. What's even worse is some people, they're not ready to call this a hate crime. They're not ready to call it. Now, despite the fact that it was committed at a Catholic church, look, you shoot up a mosque, it's an anti-Islamic crime. You shoot up a synagogue, it's an anti-Semitic crime. But apparently some people on CNN just aren't ready to call this anti-Catholic.
Going through the writings, particularly going through the videos as the shooter laid out his weapons and held up each individual parts, what you saw there was a pervasive message of hate. Hate against blacks, hate against Jews, hate against God. And the target, of course, being a Catholic church. But there's also a degree of posturing there about what we're going to investigate it as. They're investigating it in support of the Minneapolis police who have a homicide case. The offender is dead. It is doubtful that anyone other than the offender, unless we learn something very new in the next couple of days, is going to be charged. I almost find the conclusion that it's a hate crime against Catholics premature, in that we are trying to attach rational motives to a completely irrational act.
Absolutely. Where is the political ideology here, right? This is someone who actually attended that school at some point, so we may assume, I'm not sure, that this person is Catholic also. But what we're looking at here is there any rationality to what this person does? This is what we see with terrorism, right? You want to terrorize a particular society with whatever your ideas are to push that idea. This is a person who we've seen with other shooters will most likely be someone with extreme mental illness.
Yeah, and actually, one of the perplexing things about these perpetrators is that they do often...
It's perplexing. I don't know why, like, it's okay to kill Catholics or it's okay to kill Christians and nobody in the media gives it some kind of, like, odd name. You know, if you go against Muslims, it's Islamophobia. If you go against Jews, it's anti-Semitism. If you go against trans, it's transphobia. But if you kill Christians and Catholics, it's, I don't know, Tuesday? Why don't we get a name? Why don't we have a phobia or an ist attached when you attack us? I don't know. It can't be a minority-majority thing because there's one for Muslims, and that's the second biggest religion in the world. Over 1 billion people. Can't be that. If you commit violence against a woman, it's misogyny, and there's more women in America than men. That's got a name. The only one that doesn't seem to have a name is Christians. Christians and Catholics. I don't know. Maybe we should come up with one. Maybe we should come up with one. I don't know. It sounds like a good idea to me. Why don't we invent a completely bullshit phrase, and then every time somebody does something we don't like, we just fling it at them as some kind of a pejorative in order to get them to stop talking. You know, like Democrats have done for the last 20 years. I don't know. It's a thought. Food for thought, everybody. Food for thought. But, of course, there was one person on television, one across all the networks, one person across all the networks who got the answer right here. And, look, I'm a big fan of Scott Jennings, but even Scott kind of slow plays this, kind of, keeps his cards a little close to the vest when he says what we all know to be obviously true.
Well, I think the first question you have to ask is, why did it happen? I don't think it happened because of guns. I think it happened because somebody who was clearly suffering from severe mental illness
had access to weapons that would allow them to carry out a terrible shooting.
And the mental illness was encouraged.
But Scott, what about people who don't have mental illness?
I don't think we can tiptoe around this issue. And when you look at the messages that were written in some of the materials and on the weapons that we've seen, I mean, this person obviously was in a dark place.
Obviously.
And I want to know.
Obviously.
I'm not sure the government is in that person's life enough to know, but his parents are.
But what
his
about,
family is.
Scott, what about people who don't have mental illness? We have a huge gun violence issue here in the United States. We lead in gun violence.
But the issue today is quite obviously mental illness. And
if you take away the mental illness, it still leaves the guns.
Yep, but no, even Scott slow plays it. And look, I like Scott. I like him a lot. I use his stuff all the time. I've met him. He's a very nice guy. But even he slow plays what is obvious. If this person had been diagnosed as mentally ill because they thought they were in the wrong body, which is obviously a mental illness, then they wouldn't have been able to purchase the firearms legally, and this would not have happened. And when Scott Jennings says that this mental illness is the only mental illness in America that is repeatedly encouraged and supported, there's nonprofits to make sure it happens more often, not less often. There's nonprofits for every disease and disorder and mental illness. You got schizophrenia, and you got your bipolar organization. You got depression hotlines. Those are to make sure these things happen less. Transgenderism is the only mental illness in America that we seem to be promoting. I don't know. Seems like a recipe for disaster. Seems like a recipe for disaster. I don't know. You know what else is a recipe for disaster? Basically electing Democrats almost anywhere. We're going to get to that in 1 second. Before we do that, Old Glory Bank.
When big banks decide who gets access to America's financial systems and who doesn't, who do you think gets left out? Middle Americans who proudly wave their pro-America values. Cancel culture in banking is corrosive. It limits your participation in a vibrant, free market economy. Fortunately, you can fight back. You now have the opportunity to invest in the bank that's investing in a fair American banking system, one based in freedom. Ownership in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank, is here. Old Glory Bank is a full-service FDIC-insured bank that's the alternative to overreaching, un-American big banks. We stand for privacy, security, and liberty. We stand for freedom, family, faith, and the flag. We stand for all the values you stand for, and for the values big banks can't stand. So help keep banking in the hands of Main Street, not Wall Street. To invest in Old Glory Bank, go to oldglorybank.com.
Guys, head on over to oldglorybank.com. That's oldglorybank.com. Lock in those interest rates today before Jerome Powell either gets fired or wisens up, guys. Head on over to oldglorybank.com. That's oldglorybank.com. Giddy up. Let's go. So, electing Democrats is also something that is a recipe for disaster in America. I've been meaning to show you guys this clip for like 3 days now, but because of breaking news, I was unable to. Mayor Brandon Johnson in Chicago. Look, there are bad mayors out there. There are bad mayors. Zoran Mondani is going to be a bad mayor in New York. But Mayor Brandon Johnson is an idiot. Like, he's dumb. Like, neurons fire slower in his brain than in other people's. And this is a perfect example of it. Joe Scarborough on MSNBC gives this guy like 10 opportunities to just say the word yes to an obvious question, and he just can't do it.
Would you also like to get federal funding to help put 5,000 more cops on the street in Chicago? Would that help drive down crime?
Well, look, policing by itself is not the full strategy.
No, I understand that. You've talked about the other things you want, and I said those are good and important programs, but I'm asking also, would 5,000 more police officers on the street in Chicago be helpful to go along with all of those social programs that a lot of cities are engaging in and having success with?
Well, look, here's the best way I can put it, Joe, is that in the 90s when I was in high school, we had 3,000 more police officers and we had 900 people being murdered every single year in Chicago. It's just not policing alone. Of course, we want more detectives.
I know it's not policing alone, but I know it's not policing alone. You've told me everything else you want. I'm curious, and this does come down to an ideological difference between people. Do you believe that the streets of Chicago would be safer if there were more uniformed police officers on the streets of Chicago?
I believe the city of Chicago and cities across America would be safer if we actually had, affordable housing. Look,
okay,
I'm not saying that
that's not the question I asked. My question is, and I just need a yes or a no, do you believe the streets of Chicago would be safer if you got all of those other extraordinary programs put back into place, which do have a history of being successful, if that's complemented by having 5,000 more cops on the streets of Chicago?
I don't believe that we should narrow it down to just police officers, Joe, is what I'm saying. That is an antiquated approach. I'm saying we've invested in detectives.
Mr. Mayor, are you hearing what I'm saying? I'm agreeing with you that all of these other social programs are extraordinarily important. I just need a yes or a no, and then this will be the last time I ask. If you get all of those other social programs that 800 million that New York City does, Los Angeles, other people do with great success, Would an additional 5,000 cops on the streets in Chicago help complement those programs to make Chicago safer?
Look, we are working hard to make sure that our police department is fully supported. I don't believe that just simply putting out an arbitrary number around police officers is the answer. What I'm saying is policing and affordable housing. It's policing and mental and behavioral health care services. It's policing and youth employment. It's a full package. Of course, we want to make sure that our police department is fully supported. That's why I've invested in our Detectives Bureau, because what we have seen in the city of Chicago, when we solve crime, it acts and serves as a deterrent. It's policing and all of the other efforts that we're doing. Here's the last thing that I'll say to that. The federal government...
It's like his face just can't say yes. More cops would lead to less crime. He just can't get off the ideology. Democrats cannot get off the ideology. Nothing else matters. And that's why they continue to suck. That's why they continue to suck. Tank Engine says Democrats are dwindling, and this is why. This guy's a joke, just like the rest of them. You got that right, bro. You got that right, bro. Guys, do me a favor. Oh, actually, we'll hold off on that for a second. Stay tuned to the end of the show because we're going to laugh our asses off at Cracker Barrel. But Carolyn Levitt had a response to everything Donald Trump has been doing in Washington, D.C., and she says that living like animals, being afraid to go outside at night for fear of being mugged or raped or killed, is a choice that is being made by Democrats, and you don't have to live like that.
And that's why on Monday, the president took additional action to sign an executive order taking steps to ensure that cashless bail in Washington, D.C. is eliminated. For too long, D.C.'s reckless cashless bail policies have allowed dangerous criminals to be quickly released, which endangers everyone who lives in and visits our wonderful capital. No cash bail has also foolishly forced law enforcement to repeatedly arrest the same offenders over and over again, only for them to be released back into our nation's capital. This is the definition of insanity, and the president is seeking to end it. He also signed a separate executive order addressing the crime emergency in D.C. by instructing the National Park Service to hire additional United States Park Police officers to support public safety, and directing the U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C. to hire additional prosecutors to focus solely on violent and property crimes. So while liberal Democrats across the country continue to double down on their failed soft-on-crime approach, the American people, including local D.C. leadership, business owners, and residents, are rallying behind President Trump's crime crackdown. According to new polling, 81% of Americans say crime is a major problem in large cities across the country. And a clear majority of Americans believe the president's actions are justified and necessary to reduce crime in these cities. Indu Bhatia, who runs a liquor store a half-mile from the White House here just down the street, is one of those Americans who are grateful for President Trump's public safety push. Indu recently told the New York Post that her store was robbed so many times that they had to spend exorbitant sums of money on security, jeopardizing her family's financial future. But thanks to President Trump's strong action, Indu said, quote, "All of my employees, including me, we feel much safer, and even our customers feel really happy when they walk into our store." And just yesterday, Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser credited President Trump for surging federal law enforcement personnel and said neighborhoods, quote, "feel and are much safer." We thank Mayor Bowser for her cooperation and her willingness to help us make D.C. safe and beautiful. This entire effort has vindicated what President Trump and law and order advocates have been saying for years, and this is our message to Americans in Democrat-run cities nationwide. Decline is a choice. You don't have to live in constant fear of being robbed, raped, or murdered. Your leaders are lying to you, and they have been failing you for decades. The President Trump approach of upholding law and order by letting our brave men and women in blue actually do their jobs to aggressively fight crime works. In just a few weeks, President Trump has done more for D.C. residents than Democrats did in 50 years. And this can be replicated in other crime-ridden cities across the nation. As President Trump has said, all of these elected officials in charge have to do is pick up the phone and ask for the president and the federal government's help. President Trump doesn't care if they are a Republican or a Democrat leader. He wants Americans to be safe and for every law-abiding American citizen across the country to be able to thrive in their city and in their community.
Living like this is a choice, and it is a choice that you do not have to make. And shockingly, wildly, some Democrats are actually considering not making that choice. We'll get to that in 1 second. Before we do that, Mike Lindell.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Guys, head on over to MyPillow.com. Use promo code LOUD. That's MyPillow.com. Promo code LOUD for up to 80% off everything on the website. That's MyPillow.com. Promo code LOUD. So some Democrats are actually beginning to see the error of their ways. Are actually starting to see that cashless bail is not only the beginning of this problem, but could be the solution to most of it. As I can't believe I'm going to say this, Governor Kathy Hochul is beginning to rethink the concept of cashless bail.
Offender 1,000 times, and you are still not going to be held on bail. That's what I had to change. And so those changes are bearing out. That's why we're showing a decline in all crimes, especially retail theft. So he can misstate the facts, say what he wants to say, but he's wrong. He's wrong. And also, many of the cases he gave examples to, he gave this whole memo of all these examples. Many of the cases were bail eligible, but guess what? The judge decided to do something differently than what the prosecutors had asked for rightfully under the law. So I think the question I have is, come on, judges, you're doing your part here. I need the judges to step up. And I've been surprised at the number of judges who don't seem to know the law has changed. When I read commentary from them on why they did not hold someone on bail who common sense would have said should have been held, but also our laws say should have been held. And so I think there's also a lot of questions that I've had for a long time.
I'm not sure if you guys can hear that in the background, but if you listen closely, you can actually hear Elise Stefanik's footsteps creeping up like that meme with The Undertaker. Wow. Needs the judges to step up a little bit more and keep some of these people in prison. Wow. Governor Hochul, look at you. Not only did Governor Hochul do that, but she also, came out and thanked President Trump. She came out and thanked President Trump for assisting her in the rebuild of Penn Station. This is hilarious. This woman is scared shitless of Elise Stefanik, and she should be. She should be, because quite frankly, New Yorkers have had enough, and unfortunately, we're going to be stuck with Zohran Mamdani for quite some time, it would appear. So it turns out we're going to be even more annoyed when it's time for the governor race. Yeah. Step up, bro. Step up. Keep people in jail. This isn't challenging stuff. Here's one person who should definitely be in jail, and her name is Lisa Cook. Who the hell is Lisa Cook? Well, she is one of the Federal Reserve governors, which is a quite lofty title. This is another story I've been trying to get to for several days because it's hilarious. But it turns out Donald Trump fired one of the Federal Reserve chairmen the other day. I believe there's 12 governors all over the country, and then there's Jerome Powell at the very top, who also needs to be fired. But this one wasn't fired due to incompetence. She was fired because she committed mortgage fraud. President Donald Trump on Monday said that he had fired Federal Reserve Board Governor Lisa Cook, an unprecedented and dramatic escalation on his attack on the U.S. Central Bank independency over its refusal to cut interest rates. Yeah, that's how it starts. But that's actually not what happened. That's actually not what happened. Of course, her lawyer, Abbe Lowell, who you'll remember represented Hunter Biden, said that it was unprecedented. It was absolutely unprecedented this sort of thing happened, despite the fact that she committed mortgage fraud. Paul Krugman of the New York Times, a man who has spent 40 years being wrong, he was also unbelievably outraged.
It's really that she did anything wrong, but anything that's being raised.
We got to make sure we get the sad puppy dog face from Jake Tapper, because the DEI hire over at and I say that not in a racial term, in a that's on point term. We'll explain in a second.
Pertains to, back when she was a professor at Michigan State, not at the Fed. Normally, firing for cause means that you're drinking on the job or you're stealing office supplies or something like that. It's something related to not doing the job. And there's been no hint of that. Nothing. No one has claimed, even the Trump people aren't trying to claim that she's doing a bad job at the Fed, that she's unqualified or behaving inappropriately. So this is crazy. This is, if I cheated on my third grade exam, should I be fired from my current job? This is completely insane.
Treasury Secretary Bessent commented on the move in today's cabinet meeting. Take a listen to what he had to say.
So it turns out cheating on your third grade exam is the exact same thing as committing mortgage fraud, according to Paul Krugman. That's because Paul Krugman is a dumbass. But look, it's not like the Federal Reserve has anything to do with, setting mortgage rates or anything. That would be like a pharmacist being a drug dealer, or a doctor being a drug dealer. Hey, Doc Spencer, how's it going? That would be like, I don't know, a daycare worker being a child predator. You can't be the person who sets mortgage rates and then commit mortgage fraud. But, it's more than that. It's more than that. Because it turns out she's actually, on top of everything else, a really awful person to boot.
Here's a little bit more about Lisa Cook and why the New York Times, we're going to get into this New York Times piece, but this is why the New York Times decided to run cover for her this weekend. Even though no one's above the law, Emily, no one is above the law. The left has told us this for 4 years. She retweeted Ava DuVernay. Quote, "This is what defund the police means. Don't let white nationalists and Trump make you afraid of the term. Defunding the police means defunding armed responses to issues that don't need a gun." And I guess Lisa Cook and Ava DuVernay are going to figure out which situations require a gun and which do not. Cool. I'd feel safe as a cop, wouldn't you?
Well, this is how we know Lisa Cook is rich. She wants to defund the police. She thinks it's a great idea. True. That's how we know.
Yeah. All right, here's another one. She retweeted about Tom Cotton's 2020 op-ed about sending the troops in to restore order. "Running this puts my black New York Times colleagues in danger." Remember when one of the New York Times writers wrote that? Yeah. Lisa Cook retweeted it. She's endangered. I'm in my big house in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She's probably looking at her lake views, wondering like, oh, how's my condo doing? Could I get an extra extension built onto it? Can I get the full condo soon? What can I have? Oh, yeah, retweet. My black New York Times colleagues are in danger. Yes, I'm part of the struggle. She retweeted somebody saying Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, who had just banned COVID masks, wrote, quote, "He's literally trying to murder us, especially BIPOC people."
That is unserious. I mean, this is somebody who is a federal, that is so deeply unserious for the position that she holds.
BIPOC in case our listeners have forgotten, is Black Indigenous persons of color. She herself tweeted in 2020, "I agree with Angela Merkel that free speech has its limits." Okay, so she's a radical leftist.
And that's why she was fired. That's why she was, because it turns out you cannot be a member of the independent Federal Reserve Board and be a radical leftist at the same time. Why? Because that is going to impact the way you, vote to cut rates, which we are still waiting to have happen. A radical leftist who thinks that the law doesn't apply to them because they are BIPOC people. Whatever the hell that means. See, what did I tell you? Look. Catholics, Christians, we need to come up with our own word. We need a word. We need an istaphobe or a something to add on to the end of our name so that people will, we can bludgeon them about the head. So when a Democratic mayor comes out and does something, we can add our little moniker at the end, the way she added BIPOC people, which, of course, as Megyn Kelly said there, is Black and Indigenous people of color. Wow, we're really stretching it there. She was about 2 seconds away from calling herself a Latinx. Yeah, that's a word that no Spanish person has ever used, ever. That's a word that no Spanish person has ever used, ever. But she is now out, giving Donald Trump the ability to appoint a new one, which would be exciting. Hopefully we get somebody who's at least remotely fiscally responsible. But we shall see. Before we get to the rest of the story today, we got two more stories that I want to make sure that I get to. FEMA employees have been put on paid leave until further notice. Why did they do that? And you'll never believe how much Cracker Barrel spent for their shitty rebrand. Before we get to that, here's Jeremy.
Hey everyone, sorry to barge in like this, but I do want to talk to you about this opportunity for 45% off of Everyday Dose coffee. And this isn't just your regular coffee, folks. If you're like me, you love your coffee routine. I've loved my coffee routine since I was probably 16 years old. Unfortunately, as I've gotten older, some of the coffee that I love doesn't love me back and does cause bloating, does cause jitters, can only drink so much a day, and there's really only so much I could do with it. Now, Everyday Dose is known as Coffee Plus Benefits. And what I mean by that, folks, is there is an ingredients booklet in there that gives you a ton of different recipes on how to make cold brew coffees of all different kinds, lattes, different hot coffees, and more. But the greatest thing about Everyday Dose is it is known as Coffee Plus Benefits, meaning that you're going to have 100% Arabica coffee, and you're going to also have lion's mane, chaga, collagen protein, and nootropics that keep your brain focused. No jitters, no heart palpitations, and a ton of different recipes. And you're going to get a frother, a tumbler, a box set with a bunch of different gifts in it, an ingredients booklet for recipes, coffee, and more for only $27, folks. 45% off by going to everydaydose.com/LFATV. That's everydaydose.com/LFATV. Why not expand your experiences with coffee? That's everydaydose.com/LFATV.
So dozens of FEMA workers have been placed on leave until further notice. But why is that? Why is that? Well, let's check this out.
Critical of the Trump administration and now on paid administrative leave until further notice. Staffers were not given a specific reason, though, for that decision. The move comes a day after current and former staff sent an open letter to Congress slamming the Trump administration's changes to the agency. CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanger joins us from Washington with more on this. Good morning, Nicole. Great to see you. What else do we know about this suspension? There's no cited reason, but the timing seems to make it obvious.
Most definitely, Errol. FEMA suspending more than 20 employees who signed that open letter arguing the Trump administration had undone years of post-Katrina progress at the disaster relief agency. Multiple sources telling CBS News, by the way, it's been exactly 20 years since Hurricane Katrina. Now, Monday's open letter to Congress, known as the Katrina Declaration, said it was signed by 191 current and former FEMA employees. Some 35 of them attached their names, while the rest really withheld them over fear of retaliation. And some of the current FEMA employees who went ahead and signed their names received emails on Tuesday night saying they'd been placed on leave effective immediately and continuing until further notice, according to copies of those emails that we reviewed. Now, during their leave, employees won't have access to their email or their cell phones. They will be required to check in every day from personal emails. FEMA has shed more than a third of its workforce under the Trump administration. There are folks inside the agency who tell us they can't afford to lose any more.
I want to pivot to another big topic we've been tracking, which is crime in the nation's capital. We've got fresh new CBS News analysis showing
they can't lose any more people. Well, they're not really doing a whole hell of a lot now to begin with. You know, asking for everyone in North Carolina. Just saying. And it turns out, spoiler alert, when you talk shit about your boss in an open letter, you're probably going to lose your job. I'm not sure why that is confusing for some people. I'm also not sure why it's confusing to some of these corporations out there that think that they need to just destroy what made them great in order to, I have no idea. But if you guys have been paying attention to this Cracker Barrel scandal. Now, I live in the Northeast, so we don't have Cracker Barrels. But every time I go anywhere in the South, I make sure I stop at a Cracker Barrel because the food is delicious and I like the ambiance of it. But it turns out their new woke CEO didn't like it, and they spent, are you ready for this?
But even the apology is getting backlash. Cracker Barrel spending $700 million on a rebranding plan that they say will turn the product from old rustic to perhaps more modern streamlined. Customers say that's just a giant helping of biscuits and bologna. They don't like it. So after a week's worth of backlash, the Tennessee-based company did put out an apology statement of sorts, which said, in part, quote, "We know we won't always get everything right the first time, but we'll keep testing, learning, and listening to our guests and employees." But the mea culpa, well, it didn't go down that well. Critics called it lame, and social media lit up with comments like these, quote, "You kicked Uncle Herschel to the curb. Now you are paying the price. Own it and stop making excuses." Another wrote, "Eating Sunday supper in a place that looks like a car dealership does not say vintage Americana." But the company's new logo, let's begin there, a simple gold shield with the restaurant's name.
They spent $700 million on a failed rebrand. Maybe they could have given their employees a raise. I don't know. Something to think about. Something to think about. Guys, Pete Santilli is coming up next right here on this network. He's chimed in at the moment. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by Kelsey McSorley, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. So make sure you guys keep it locked in here tomorrow. We'll be talking a whole bunch of good stuff. Guys, I'll catch you all back live tomorrow. Until then, everybody, stay loud.